Subash, I think it's streaming live on YouTube now. It's just taking a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we are live on YouTube now, Subash.
Great.
We're all set.
Okay.
So, do you want to
Shall I start the screen?
Yeah, you can.
Share screen.
At the bottom, yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody.
Subash.
I am Subash Chandra Rao. I have been a practicing photographer for the last 17 years or so, and I have been using Photoshop Lightroom for almost a decade now. And this is a webinar on the aspects of photo management as well as post-processing and improving your images. First of all, I would like to start off with what is Lightroom.
Subash, I'm extremely sorry to cut you in. Just one addition to our attendees, so they know the flow. It's the flow is what we will do is we will take the question and answer session to the last, and any questions related to the slides that you have, I will keep monitoring and I will be directing to you the questions which are relevant. You can address it right then. Right?
Sure.
Okay, over to you, Subash. Thank you.
Thank you, Shishir. So just to very briefly talk about Lightroom, it has been on the scene for almost about a decade or so. It was basically one of the very useful softwares to photo manage and also batch process, your images. So as a result, in the last 7 years or so, it has received tremendous amount of boost in terms of features to help photographers to quickly batch process images, manage all the photographs within the Lightroom. So as a result, currently I'm managing close to about 20,000 plus images. In many ways, it is very important for a photographer to manage and also know where the photographs are. So as a result, it becomes very important for a photographer to organize their images and then housekeep all the images and make sure that you know where the images are and then process your images. So as a result, Lightroom has become very important to do photo managing as well as processing images. So that was the brief about Lightroom as per the important aspects of what Lightroom is today. And just to make it very clear, the session today is mostly about Lightroom Classic. But you should know that there is more than one Lightroom today. So just to clear out some confusion, if some of you may have, Lightroom today comes in two versions. One is what we call it as Lightroom Classic, and the other one is what we call it as Lightroom CC, which is basically the Creative Cloud. The major difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom CC is in about a couple of folds. Lightroom Classic is basically designed to be primarily a desktop based software application, which is primarily designed for photographers to manage many images. I would say about some of the photographers today may manage about 400,000 images or 500,000 images or a lakh of images. So for that purpose, I think the primary application today would be the desktop version, which you see on the left, which is the Lightroom Classic. So where you will have, all your images stored in an external hard drive, and then make sure that all your images are cataloged. On the other hand, you have the Lightroom Creative Cloud app, which is basically the cloud app, which may reside on your iPads or on your cell phones. But there is a very strong connection between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom CC. You can process all your images in Lightroom Classic, but also sync up a couple of images that you would want to take with you or carry with you from Lightroom Classic to your phones, perhaps. So there is a method I will show you later as to how to sync all your images to your phones or your iPads. So that is the brief about the difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom Creative Cloud. Shishir and the rest of you, hope I'm not going too fast.
No, I think you're in a good flow,
Uh,
Subash. Please
I
carry
hope
on.
the pace is okay.
Yes, we are able to follow you. You can please carry on.
Okay. Uh, you must also know that Lightroom is a catalog-based application in the sense that the Lightroom never manipulates your original images. In the sense that, you know, Lightroom has a way of what we call it as the database, what you see here. So the database has a reference file which is linked to your hard drive. So your catalog consists of file location where the images are residing. So it will have the database related to where the images are located. It will build all the previews and all the adjustments that you do, like exposure correction or curves or any other metadata related to, say, for example, color coding or providing star ratings or flags. All those information is stored in the catalog, but not your original images. So the advantage of using Lightroom is that the Lightroom never touches or manipulates your original images. So they remain intact. So it remains or resides in your external hard drive and a reference file is linked to the catalog. So that is how Lightroom works. Okay. With this, I would like to move on to the Lightroom application itself. Okay. So I'm starting fresh. I have created a new catalog called Lightroom webinar, which you see on the top left.
Uh,
Okay.
Subhash, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. The screen share is not updated.
Okay.
I know what the problem is. Can I request you to kind of stop screen share and share again so that it refreshes the feed?
Okay. Uh, Stop screen share. Okay. Is the Lightroom application visible now?
Yes, perfect. You can carry on.
All right, thank you. Uh, so shall I continue?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
All right. So I've started fresh. Right now, currently, it will feel like as if I'm starting application for the first time. There are no photographs I've not imported. So let me start off with the importing process. Okay. So we discussed about what is Lightroom, what is the difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom CC. So let us move on to the process of importing photographs into your Lightroom. Okay. So there are two methods. First process or the first method that I would like to show you is using the uh, the images that are stored in a hard drive. I've connected an external hard drive to my computer and I will import the images from the external hard drive. To do that, I'll go to File, import photos and video, you can either click here or you can click on the import button, which is on the left. Okay, so I will click on the import button. So a dialog box opens up, and on the left is where you will choose your source. So currently I have connected an external hard drive, and there is a folder called I've created a folder called Lightroom webinar, in which all these photographs uh, are stored. So I will click on the top folder, the top level folder called the Lightroom webinar. And then you have a couple of options on the top. You have, you could import it as a copy as a DNG. That means what it will do is it will import all your raw files and convert all your images to DNG. If you know, DNG stands for digital negative, which is a proprietary open sourced raw file that was developed by Adobe a couple of years back. And then you have the option to copy your images. Copy is generally done, copy is clicked, or when you would want to click copy when you have inserted an SD card into your card reader. This is typical when you would want to import all your images from a SD card from the camera. So right now I would want to add the images because I don't want it to move away from the original source where you have the Lightroom webinar. Currently, it is on the external hard drive, and I would like to remain all the images wherever it is because I have already organized it in a manner in which I would like to talk about later as to how I organize my images. But currently, I would just like to add my images. And on the right side, you will see the typically what you would want to do is move from left side to the right side. That is how you move as far as your import is concerned. You will select your source. You can check or uncheck images that you would want to select. All right. And then you would want to build previews. For example, this is basically a very important option that I generally choose because uh, what it does is it builds smart previews in the sense that once you build smart previews, you can detach your hard drive where your hard drive is not necessary every time you process your images. So once you connect back the hard drive, after you process your images, all the files will be synced. So this is one of the very important features that you would want to choose, but it takes a little bit more time to build previews. So you could enable this if you want to detach your hard drive and work on all your files without connecting your hard drive, external hard drive. This is also a very important option that if you might have imported some images before, but if you enable this, then the computer or the Lightroom will take care to make sure that you don't import suspected duplicates. You could add to a collection, which we will talk about later. But another important aspect of your Lightroom importing process is providing keywords, which you could generally, which I generally do it after I import images, because currently, if you see, there are a lot of images which are from different locations. Okay, so you could, but otherwise you could, if you're importing from your SD card from say from one location, let's say you went to Ajanta Ellora, and then the images in your SD card are only from Ajanta Ellora, then you can go ahead and then type your keywords. So right now I have decided to add all the files without moving to any other location. I would like to import my images. So I'll click on import. Slowly it will start building all the files here. If you see, so this is one way of importing. your images. So Shishir, this might take a bit of time, not more than 2 minutes or so. But in the meantime, if there are any questions, perhaps, then I don't mind answering. Or if you would like to, uh, talk,
Uh, Shubhash,
Shishir.
I don't think there are any questions that have been asked so far. I'm just cross-checking, so
All
there
right.
are none. So maybe you can allow it to load and
Okay.
we can continue.
Sure. Sure. All right. So this is one way of importing images. The second way is the same process where you will insert your SD card and follow or repeat the same process. I think, yeah, we will move on to the next topic. Okay. So if you see, let me just briefly talk about the interface. So your Lightroom is divided into modules. If you see, you have the library module. It is basically the gallery where you view and review your images. That is one of the primary functions of the library module, where you review your images, where you select them, where you discard some images. You can color code them, you can flag them. There are many ways to select an image, which I will show you. Then you have the develop module. This is where you will process your images, edit your images, improve exposures, crop perhaps, or any other important aspects of editing that you would want to carry out with your images, you do in the develop module. And then you have a couple of other modules where you can create books, or if you have GPS enabled cameras where your images have imbibed GPS enabled metadata into your images, you can view your images using the map module. You can create slideshows that perhaps you would want to send to your clients. And this is a very important module, the book module, where you can actually create a lot of photo books and send it to services like Blurb. Of course, it's not available in India, but then you can export it as a PDF. And then you have the print module and the web module. And on the left side is your browser palette. This is where you will see that you have several ways to browse your images, which are situated in different folders. If you see, okay, you have the another important panel called the collections, which we will discuss very shortly. Okay, this is where you will. This is on the left is the browser palette or the panel. Okay, and if you have a very your if your real estate of your monitor is small, then what you could do is you could right click on your browser panel and then use the solo mode. So the solo mode will allow you to save some real estate, in the sense that if I unclick or unselect the solo mode, then I can, you know at a time reveal all the panels, but then I will have to start scrolling. If I enable the solo mode, it will save me some real estate space. So that means when I click on the catalog, the rest of the two panels will unfold or fold itself. And if I go on to collections, it is operating in the solo mode. This is one efficient way to save some real estate. Okay. On the middle is the main important area where you can review your images. So currently what you're seeing is the grid view, which is here. You can switch between grid view or loop view by clicking on the icons that you see at the bottom. Okay. So the shortcut keys for switching between the grid view and the loop view is the E key, E for elephant. So you can move to the loop view, and if you want to come back to the grid view, you press the G key, G for gravity. Okay, so I think shortcuts are very important to make sure that your workflow is very efficient and very fast, because you will have to in many ways become familiar with Photoshop Lightroom, and the shortcut keys will enable you to work faster. Okay, so I repeat, You can switch between the grid view by pressing the E key to move to the loop view. And if you want to come back to the grid view, you can come back pressing the G key. Okay. And on the right side and the bottom, you have the film strip. Okay. You can move from one, if you are in the loop view, you can, allow yourself to move from one image to the other image in the film strip. Okay, so this enables you to see what images you have coming next, or which are the images that have been passed by. So you can use your arrow keys like the left and the right to move from one image to another image. So this is a very good way to actually browse your images if you are in the loop view by enabling the film strip at the bottom. Okay. And on the right side, which is hidden, it is hidden because of this arrow that is enabled or disabled. Okay, so you can, if you click on it, then it becomes, it is enabled permanently until you would want to disable it. Okay, so right now on the right side is the strip that is context driven, in the sense that when you're in the when you're in the library module, it provides a set of, panels that are associated with library module. Like you can also do some very fast processing, like quick develop. You can quickly develop your images by pressing the auto tones, or you can, enable, increase or decrease the exposure by 1/3 stop or full stops. Okay, you can do some very quick processing using the quick module or the quick develop panel. And here also you can enable what we call it as the solo mode, which I always prefer, because once I am in the solo mode, what I could do is I can switch between different palettes. So library module also provides you with the opportunity to actually enable the keywording, where you can actually, provide keywords, and this becomes very important for you to organize your images. This is one of the best way to organize your images, is by taking time to jot down all the keywords. Because I see a lot of times, we immerse ourselves in the developing process but never give time to actually keywording your images. Keywording helps you to look for an image that you shot about 10 years ago. you know I will show you how to actually, provide keywords,
Subash,
and so on.
Subash Shishir this side.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think there's one question which is pretty much to the subject that we are discussing. So the question is, I know you don't have to really go in depth, but the question is, how different is Adobe Lightroom when you compare it to Adobe Bridge?
Okay, bridge is basically, bridge. The difference between bridge and Lightroom is to do with the interface. That's number one. Okay. Uh, while bridge was designed not just for photographers, a lot of graphic designers also use bridge. Bridge allows you to browse your images, provide star ratings, and also, allows you to move to camera raw, where you can develop your images and export them to photographers. Lightroom in the sense the easy with which you can operate a particular application. Lightroom was particularly created keeping photographers in mind, if you know. But Bridge was served many other purposes apart from, for photographers. Photographers can definitely use Bridge, no doubt about it. But I think when it comes to, batch processing, managing your catalog, or photo management per se, uh, Lightroom is more robust and efficient compared to Adobe Bridge, because Lightroom, has the catalog system, which allows you to actually, make sure that you can process your images non-destructively. You can provide keywords, create books, photo books within the Lightroom. You can, make slideshows within the Lightroom. So there are so many features that are available in Lightroom designed for photographers. So keeping photographers in mind, but Adobe Bridge was designed very generally. A lot of graphic designers use Adobe Bridge. For example, if somebody is using Adobe InDesign and they wanted to take a look at some of the graphic assets, they move into Adobe Bridge. But specifically, if you ask me, the only difference between Lightroom and Bridge is the fact that Lightroom was dedicated or designed for keeping photographers in mind. I hope that answers the question, Shishir.
Definitely, Subash. Thank you. Thank you. You can proceed.
Yeah. So if you see, I have enabled the solo mode, which allows me to actually, provide browse through many palettes that are available. Okay. Uh, so these are some of the palettes that are available in the library module. Okay. These are context driven. So as soon as I move to the develop module, so I've just clicked on the develop module. The context of the right panel changes if you see. Okay. Here also I will enable the solo mode, which I've already enabled. So that means, see, all your palettes have changed. That means it is context sensitive. It has palettes that are dedicated for that module. Okay. So this is how you actually move yourself in the Lightroom realm. Okay. I will come back to the library module. The shortcut keys to come back to the library module is G. If you press G, it will come back to the grid view again. Okay. So I'm back in the library module. And if I select an image and I want to directly take it to the develop module, I press the D key, D for develop. So I click on develop D and it will move me to the develop module with that image enabled so that I can start processing them. Okay, so the T and G. So I come back to the grid view. Now let me discuss I will say so that it gives me more room to actually take a look at all the grids, all the images in the important things about the grid view is basically to review your images. Okay, so there are a couple of images that you see that are similar in nature. So if I want to review an image, there are two ways to review an image. One is what we call it as the compare view. Okay, you see that X and Y. This is what we call it as the compare view. So I select two images and then I press the compare between which is a better shot. Okay, just so now I'm in the compare view. If you see, so now this gives me the ability to judge the left image is and then it moves to the next image. Okay, so I have to compare between only two images, or since if you see to compare the survey mode. If I go here on the bottom right, this is the tool palette. So if you see, this is the compare and this is the survey. Okay, the shortcut key for survey is N for New Delhi. Okay, now I am in the survey mode. So that means this gives me the ability to judge a series of images together.
Subash, sorry to interrupt. Subash, am I audible? Uh, Subash,
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Am I audible?
yeah,
Subhash,
Yes. Shishir.
we feel there's a disturbance in the internet connectivity from your end. We are not able to grasp what you are saying. There's a lot of glitch in the flow of your voice. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if it has to do with Lightroom and the video running simultaneously. Do you
Can you hear me now?
kind
Okay.
of? It's still kind of breaking.
Okay. So
It's
let me just quickly close a couple of
yeah. I
windows
think
that perhaps I
yeah.
may or not.
I'm not sure if it is the
There is a bit of lag.
yeah. I think it's the graphics probably, which is kind of making it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to close a couple of windows. So
Maybe
perhaps
yeah.
just clear out a bit of RAM.
It's better now. Actually, it's better than before. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the screen now?
I can definitely see the screen.
Okay. So it's taking a little bit of time to load because the images are
Yeah. Or maybe do you want to use a smaller file or probably for the demonstration purpose, lesser images? I'm not sure. I'm just giving you a
perhaps I'll just
yeah.
check.
No problem.
Uh,
Until then,
so
I am sure
right
our
now
audience
it's
are going to be patient, so they're just want to allow us a
okay.
minute to clear with this glitch. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely taking a bit of time for the images to load. The images, couple of images have loaded on the grid view.
Okay.
Shishir.
Yeah, yeah, you are audible.
So can I continue? Can I continue?
Yeah,
Am
try
I
try
still
doing it.
sharing the screen?
Yeah, you are. Your screen is visible. You
Okay.
can try continuing. Let's see how it goes.
All right. So now we are able to see. Now, if you see, the couple of shots are very similar in nature. Uh, Shishir, can I continue?
Yes, Shubhash. Now it's visible. You please carry on.
Yeah. All right. So if you see, if you see a couple of similar shots for New Delhi, or you click on this button, it gives me the ability to quickly judge a series of images which are very similar in nature. So for example, the last shot is something that perhaps I think works compared to the rest of them. So what I could do is start eliminating. When I press the X button, it will start shortlisting the images that perhaps are really important to me. Okay, once I shortlist between the images that perhaps is the one that is going to be processed, what I do is now is the time to provide star rating. Now if you see, I can start giving star ratings like 1, 2, 3 star rating, and then I can also color code an image. Now generally what I do is if I want to process a certain image, I generally provide a minimum of 3 star ratings. If I decide that this particular image is worth processing, then I give 3 star image, 3 star rating, and then I click on the green color code. So that means if you see, this particular image is green color coded now. So now whatever images I color code as green are the ones that I generally process. Okay. Now, why do I give color codings or star ratings? Which, for example, this image, probably I will select star rating. Okay. And then this is a good image. So I can start giving, say, 3-star ratings. Okay, you can press the number pad like 1, 2, 3, up to 5 to give star ratings, or you can click on these stars here. This image, I don't think I like it. So what I will do is there is something called as a reject. Can you see here? X, if you press X, it rejects the image. Okay, I don't like this image, so I can reject this image. So one of the very important aspects or process of your images to view your images is to also decide which images are good and which images are bad. So based on your color codings, you will decide which images perhaps you want to throw away, which images are the ones that you want to keep. So that way, one of the very important reasons why you would want to do that is when you want to, you know, perhaps filter out your images, right? So if you go to your top, there is a top bar here. There is something called as library filter. This is where you can start filtering your images. So that means, for example, if I go to attributes, if I press attributes, look for images that have 3-star ratings. Now it will start filtering out and will start showing you only those images that have 3-star ratings. Okay, now if you see, there are many 2 or 3 different types of color codes. So then you can say, find me an image with a green tag. So if I press that, it will start shortlisting the images that will allow you to actually filter out images and look for the images that you really want to perhaps export them or process them. Now, this becomes very useful if you want to find an image that you shot, say, 10 years ago. Okay, so this is the best way. So when you process your images, even before processing your images, it becomes very important for you to organize your images, review your images, provide star ratings, color code them, and then start processing them. I never move to develop module without making sure of these things. This becomes very important for housekeeping. Okay, because if you see, currently this catalog consists of, if you see all photographs, 3,569 images. This is a very just about 2% of my images. My original catalog consists of about 20,000 images. So you will keep building your catalog over a period of time, because you are getting into photography, and then over a period of time you will start building about 20,000 images, 40,000 images. So how do you manage them? You manage them by reviewing them, by providing star ratings, deleting those images that perhaps you feel are bad or not good, and then color coding them to keep a tab on about which images are raw files. For example, for raw images, I color code it as green. And once I process, if my images come back as stiff, then I color code it as red. So there are various ways to manage your images. In all photograph, I can go to, say, for example, metadata. This is a very useful tab to actually, filter out your images using metadata. Like, for example, find me images that I shot in 2009. So there are 582 images that I've shot in 2009. Then I can shortlist based on lenses, for example. Or let's say, okay, I have found images on 2009. I would like to now look at TIFF images. So once I click on the red label, it will start showing me. If you see, can you see now? I'm only making sure that I'm viewing only TIFF files that have already been processed. Okay, so this is the best way to filter out and search for images that perhaps you would want to write at your fingertips. Okay, you could, so there are many criteria that you can provide here. You see, look for images. For example, one of the best ways to find out which is your favorite focal length. So if I go to all data, and if you see focal length, now there are 15 images that have been shot with 14 focal length. Look at this. That means, this I have shot a lot of images with 18 So there are 335 images. Okay. Then there are, I've used 28 with 253 images. So there are a lot of images. For example, so this, see, my one of my favorite focal lengths is 120 mm. So this gives you an opportunity to also decide about what are the kind of focal lengths that you have used. It gives you some sort of a thought process of what are the focal lengths that you use very frequently. There are a lot of ways to filter out your images. So you can use text, for example. You can search your images based on keywords like find me an image of a beach. See, there are images. So as soon as I type, because I've already given keywords saying that beach, so it is looking for images of beach. Okay. Or I can type find me an image of, say, I must have given some image, something called as red. Okay. Can you see? It will start filtering out based on the criteria of red. So that means they have given keywords like red to the image. So this is something that perhaps is also not as robust in Adobe Bridge, that what you see here in Lightroom. It's a very powerful application to review your images, photo manage. This is something that is not perhaps is as robust as in Adobe Bridge, which is also one of the reasons why most of the photographers use Adobe Lightroom compared to Adobe Bridge. So I hope I could add another important point to why Lightroom is more important than Bridge for photographers. So this is something that perhaps is also very important. Another important small detail that I would like to bring to your attention is the thought process of how I organize my images. If you see, now this is something that perhaps is after a lot of years of thought process, I have come up with a way to actually name the folders. This is very important. So I name the folder with a hyphen, which year it was shot and which month. Okay. Now, if I, for example, visit, say, Kaban Park, if you see, so I've provided a new, a parent folder for Kaban Park because I've visited Kaban Park a lot of times. So you could, use this plus sign to actually add folders and subfolders so that you can start organizing them. Okay. So that is something that's very important. For example, I can create a folder called Humpy. Okay. So I will go to Lightroom. Inside that Lightroom webinar folder, I'll create a new folder called Humpy. Okay, this is going to be the parent folder for all the other Humpy folders. Okay, so I select it. Okay, now you have a folder called Humpy. I am going to select both these folders and move it across to that particular parent folder. Okay, now another important thing that I would want, see, it's giving me and saying that you're going to move your files. Now this is very important for all photographers. Whatever you do, whatever moving of folders, manipulating of folders, it would be suggested that you do it only from within Lightroom. Because if you do it outside the Lightroom in a regular Windows browser, Lightroom will lose track of it. So it is very important. If you want to move folders, you have to move it from within Lightroom. Okay, now you see, I've given a parent folder. So this is how you organize your images. Okay, I'll take another 2 minutes perhaps to you know uh, talk about collections. Now, if you see, collections are like albums. It is not. It is not something. So when you give star ratings to your images, it is available. It is if you say stop using Lightroom from today, let's say till today you use Lightroom and you provided some star ratings to your images. Tomorrow, if you suppose if you want to use some other software and you import all your images to that particular software, you can still view star ratings as part of your metadata. But if you see collections, which are like albums, these are something that is available only in Lightroom. Okay, you have two types of collections that you can create. One is what we call it as, in fact, once I create these folders, I always make sure that I create collection. or collection sets. Okay, I never use the folders. So I create an album called, say, for example, red. I'll create a collection called something called as red. Okay, and I will include selected photos, or right now I will set it as a target collection. Okay, so I've created a collection. The plus sign means this is an active collection. That means all the photographs that I choose and send it to a particular collection, it will come and sit in the red. So if I go to, this is the best way to organize your images. See, if you in Kaban Park, I saw a couple of images with red building. So I'm going to select a couple of them. Okay, and then to move to the collection, I can either drag it to that collection. Okay, I've selected these three. Can you see? I have dragged it to collection. It is actually a tedious process, but the best process is to use the shortcut key. Right now, if you see that plus icon, that means this is the active collection. So I can select a couple of images and press the B key, B for Bombay. As soon as I press B, it will add to the collection. See, add it to the targeted collection. See, so this way I create a lot of collections. I create a collection based on subject matter. So if I create a collection called trees, so that means wherever, from whichever country I've shot trees, all the trees, irrespective of wherever I've shot it, will go to that collection. So for example, I've created a collection called red. Whatever, like even if a bird is red, and if I can bring it to this collection. So that way it becomes easier for me to manage the catalog or manage my images. So it is also easy for me to search an image. So I can create a collection called beach. I can create a collection called doors. So if you see wherever you have shots doors, you can put it in that collection. Okay. So with this, I would actually like to move to the develop module. Shishir, can
Yeah,
I
Subash.
continue? Can I
Subash,
continue
I
or
think, yeah, I think we have a few questions, but nothing related to what the slides are talking right now. So I have actually,
okay?
lined up those questions for the end of the session, so you can continue with what
Okay.
you
All right, great.
have.
So it's time for us to, now that we have now that we have reviewed our images, selected certain images, and we have color coded certain images, I think it is time to move to the develop module. So let us process some images. Okay. So let us say that I will take one of the images to process. So just a minute, I'm just choosing the right image to take it to. So if you see, so let's take this image. Okay, this is so I've pressed the D key to move from library module to the develop module. Okay, I would like to concentrate on the six sliders that are very important. Okay, so it is important for us to, you know, start editing based on, correcting exposure. So what is going to be part of your editing is correcting your exposures, cropping out images, improving color. uh, Perhaps you would want to retouch an image if you see some disturbance in an image. uh, and these are some of the things that you would want to think through before you actually edit your image. Generally what I do is, before I edit my image, I actually make note of what are the things that this image needs, and then address each problem one by one. So for example, this image is totally overexposed. How do I know that? You can also eyeball it, but if you take a look at the histogram, the entire data is leaning to the right. So that means it has been clipped out. If you see, can you see this? Okay. So these are the details that have been completely clipped out. Okay. So I would like to first of all address this image by correcting exposure. Then this also lacks contrast because I can see that in the midtones and the shadows, I don't see any details. So I would want to increase the contrast of this image. This image is also tilted slightly to the right. I would like to correct that by bringing it to the proper balance. What else? Of course, compositionally, if you see, this is not a great image, but I would want to address this particular image because this has a lot of problems. And to start with, can you see this auto button here on the right in the develop module? This is a very important button that has been given a lot of impetus by Adobe in the last 6 months. Because this auto button, the Adobe says that they have improved this auto button using what we call it as Adobe Sensei. It is their uh, augmented slash uh, there is a terminology that is used in very recent times, computer based analysis. So it does auto correction by analyzing thousands of images and providing an optimum amount of exposure. So right now I will start by actually clicking on this button and you will see how Adobe addresses all the problems in this. Of course, it is only to do with exposure. Can you see from, so if you want to compare your image before and after, you press your / key. This is before.
Subhash, I think there is a little bit of a lag, so you might need
1
to
second.
slow down a little. Yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah, your screen is
Okay.
visible now.
Can you see? Is visible?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Great. Okay. So if you press the / key, you will be able to see the before and after of the image. So if you see on the right, can you see the before? This is before. And then you have what we call it as the, so if I press the / key again, it will show me the after. Before, before, after. So Adobe Sensei is something that is perhaps Adobe is improving in the last couple, has been improving in the last couple of months to actually provide you the best exposure. You can edit at this, or I'll just reset this image. This is the way to reset an image by pressing the reset button. Okay. And so generally auto is a good starting point, but but what professionals do is actually to use all these slides very subjectively. Okay, so I know that the exposure is you know is is a lot because I can see that the data is completely leaning to the right. So what I can do is I can bring down the, if you move the slider to the left, you can start decreasing the exposure. Okay, so I've already improved this image a ton from here before to here. Then I also sense that there are a couple of these areas where the image needs some details in the shadow areas. So I can increase the shadow areas. If you
Shivash,
see, can you see?
Shivash, I'm
Yes,
extremely
Shishi.
sorry, but I personally feel there's still a little bit of lag. We're not able to get that. I'm not sure if it is because of or too many images loaded. Is that the reason? Could it be the reason? Uh,
Okay.
it's not in real time. When you are correcting it, it's not in real
Okay.
time.
It's not real time, is it? Okay. Okay. Should I just restart the application?
You can try that. You can try that
Yeah.
because I've already stopped the video option on your this thing also. So I think that would have
Okay.
saved a bit of RAM on your end. So you can probably
Great.
try.
Okay. 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 So let me just exit the Lightroom and then restart.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's definitely been very engaging and interesting so far. So
Okay.
no problem. You can definitely quit
Yeah.
and restart that.
Screen steering is stopped. Okay. This is actually 6 hours or 7 hours
Oh,
concepts
content. Yeah,
trying to be crunched into 1 hour. So
got it.
I hope I'm not moving too fast or too slow. Did I spend too much
No,
of time in the library module? Because I
no,
think it was a
no,
couple
no,
of minutes ago.
definitely. You are on the right track at least,
Okay.
but that's what I feel. So I'm sure you can
Okay.
take your time and explain them the editing bit of it. Yeah,
Okay. 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 So probably I had enabled that build previews. Maybe that was also one of the reasons. I think that was the important reason why there was a lag, because
maybe,
it slows the computer down.
maybe.
It was building smart previews.
Yeah. You
Look
want
at
to share your screen, Subash?
I'm just starting up Lightroom.
Okay, okay, okay.
Probably that smart previews is what created this.
Yeah, it does take a lot of cache, so I believe
Correct.
that might be one of the reasons. I mean, just a big shout out to all the attendees out there. Thanks for being patient. Just a minute, and we're gonna fix this.
Okay. So shall I start sharing the screen?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm back. Hope the screen is visible, Shishir.
Yes, yes, Subhash, it is.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to actually take a moment to show you this image of the gradient tone map that I created just to understand how these slides, particularly in the the basic panel or the develop module work. Now, when I increase the exposure, can you see how the data is shifting? So whatever was brighter on the right side is becoming brighter, and whatever was darker is also shifting towards becoming brighter. Okay, this is one of the gradient tone maps is one of the best way to actually understand what these slides do. Okay, so if you see, when I increase the exposure, your image is becoming brighter, and if you see, the data of the histogram is also leaning towards the left. So that means all the data whatever was in the middle and on the shadow areas is also leaning towards the right. Okay, what does the contrast do? Contrast basically affects the midtones. If you see, you know uh, it's trying to increase the difference between the whites and the darks, right? That is what the contrast does. So when you punch contrast, or when you push contrast, or when you increase the contrast, what it is doing is the whites become whiter and the blacks become blacker, but that gradation is also becoming very thin. If you see, take a look at the middle, the difference or the variation is not soft, or the transition is not as soft. So that is why some the contrast is something that is to be used very carefully, unlike your clarity slider. Okay, we will come to that, but take a look at what the contrast does. Okay, you got to know what the exposure does. Okay, you also got to know what the contrast does. The contrast increases the variation between the whites and the darks, while also making sure the transition, between the midtones is not as smooth. Okay. Then highlights. If you see, when I recover or when I bring the slider to the left, whatever the brightest areas which were on the right have darkened. So highlights basically concentrates on the brightest areas and leaves out all the dark areas, if you see. Okay. So when I bring the slider to the left, the data is shifting. If you see from the right, it has shifted to the left. That means the brightest areas in your image have become darker, or in the photographic terms, it is basically recovering all the details in the highlight areas. Okay, if you want to reset back this particular slide, just double click on it. Okay, then shadows is basically affects the darker tones. Now if you see, so if I move the slider of the shadows to the right, all the shadow areas are trying to become brighter. Okay, so basically it is trying to make all the dark blacks to almost move towards the brighter tones. Okay, so but there are a lot of other details that you see on the left that is still in shadows. So this is basically out of range for the Lightroom. It cannot push beyond 100. Okay, so this is the maximum that a particular shadow can be recovered in this particular tone. Okay, so it's a great way to understand what the shadow does. It basically brightens all the darker areas, if you see. Okay, and leaves out the brighter areas. See, brighter areas are not being touched here. If you see on the right, extreme right, brighter shadow areas or the darker areas are becoming brighter. Okay, so
Well,
what?
uh, Subash, I just have a very quick question. I
Sure.
think you can answer it better. So the question is, what the experimentation or the difference that you are kind of showing, will there be a difference between a CR2 and a JPEG?
Definitely, definitely, definitely. If you see, raw has the capability. Raw, has is basically a lossless compression, right? So that means whatever editing you do to it, because it is a 16-bit raw file or a 12-bit raw file, whatever processing you do, the raw files can take it, right? So my suggestion is, if you want to process your images, if you want to get into the professional editing slash photography, you must shoot in raw, because only raw images are capable of, you know, retaining all the details that your camera has captured, and your Lightroom gives the best of the ability to recover all the details and edit your files and make sure your files are really high in quality. JPEGs, have a very low bandwidth. That means JPEGs are lossy compression. So JPEGs are like 8-bit, 8-bit files. So if you start editing a JPEG file, what happens is you will encounter or come across something called as banding. So that means when you increase the exposure with a JPEG file, it can probably increase the exposure, say, by 1/3 stop or half a stop. If you start pushing the JPEG file to say 1 stop or 2 stops, increase or decrease the exposure, you will start seeing banding. Okay, it will start crumbling. That is, you'll see the JPEG image start pixelating. So as a result, JPEG, because it is a lossy compression and bit depth is like only 8-bit, so whatever heavy processing you do, it cannot withstand. It will start crumbling. So it is very important for all photographers to shoot in RAW, because only RAW has the capability to withstand very heavy editing. Very heavy editing. You can push it to its limits and it will still in many ways not crumble. Of course, there is a limit to which even RAW files can take that amount of editing. But the flexibility of using, editing an image is retains the details and the shadows. All those details are retained only in raw, so you cannot recover. Let's say you shoot an image and you convert it to JPEG. and you start editing it, there is a limit to which you can recover shadow details and highlight details. You will not be able to, because after a certain point of time, you will start seeing gray matter. Okay. So it is very important to shoot in RAW and edit only in RAW. So my original files are RAW, and once I process them, I convert all my images to TIFF, tagged image file format, or Photoshop PSD. And then if I want to upload it to only social media, only then I convert it to JPEG, because JPEGs are smaller files. They're designed to be only suited for web. Even for printing, I generally print all my images. When I take it to a photo lab to print my images, I use only TIFF files. JPEG files are heavy. It loses details very heavily. So I will not be able to print a very good quality image with JPEG. So I will always edit my raw files, convert it to TIFF, tagged image file format, and then take it to photo lab for printing my images. If I want to share it on Instagram or Facebook, only then I convert my images to JPEG, because it has very low bandwidth, very less bitrate. So I will not be able to edit it to the flexibility that I would want. I hope I have answered that question, Shishir.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple of follow-up questions, but I think we can take that to the end of the session. Please carry on.
Perfect. So if you see, black is basically, the darkest areas which are, becoming brighter, if you see. So currently what I will do is I will press the J button. J is basically enables clipping. Okay. So J enables clipping warnings. So that means it will tell which are the areas that are completely in darkness. If you see the blue band or blue markings, so for Lightroom is currently telling me these are the areas that are completely in its pure black. And if you see the red, these are the areas that are pure white. Okay. So this is telling me that this particular image is clipped. So in order to recover the details in the brightest, darkest of the areas of the light and the brightest of the areas, I need to use these sliders, the black slider. So it will start. Can you see? Of course, there is a limit to which how much it can move, but it is still not being able to recover. Then you have the whites. Okay, it's still not able to recover. So if that happens, then I move on to tone curves. Okay, which will allow me to enable. See, it has disappeared. Okay, so what I've done is I've recovered all the blacks by improving the tone curve. Can you see that? Can you see all the darks? So if I start pushing all the shadows to the top, it will start recovering details. Okay, so this is how I address my issues related to clipping. Can you see? So now I have brought down the clipping part. Now, why do I do this? That's because these areas, the clipped areas, are the ones that have lost complete detail. So you can use the whites, highlights and shadows and whites and black sliders to recover all those details. If it doesn't work, only then we move on to the tone curves. Okay, now this was basically a demonstration on what the sliders do using this image. Okay, now let me uh, take you to the real images that I would like to show you by editing them. So let us address this image. Can you see this image?
Yes, Subash, please go ahead.
Okay. So I will show you by processing this image first. Okay. Now, as I said, I generally jot down or note down what are the problem areas or what are the things that this image particularly needs, and I start addressing one by one. Now, for example, this image has these clouds which are in the highlight areas. If you see, so these are the these are the tones that are in histogram in the highlight areas. So that is something that I would like to address. So if once I start, so if I move the highlights to the left, you will start seeing that I'm able to recover. Can you see that? I hope it is visible on the screen for you guys. Shishir, can you confirm?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. So can you see? I was able to recover the details in the highlights by using the highlight slider. So if I move the slider to the left, I'm able to recover all the details. Okay, this is one of the first things that I've addressed. Now, what I would also like to do is I feel that it can be improved by I would like to increase the exposure a bit. Okay, because I feel that this image can be brightened or popped up a little. Okay, not too much, but I can increase it, increase the exposure. Now, I feel that this image has good amount of contrast, but if you see, if I start pushing the contrast, it becomes very, what to say, uh, very ugly, I would say. That is why contrast slider is something that needs to be used very carefully. Okay. So if you see, you can tell an image is contrasty or not when you find these kind of valleys in the histogram. Can you see? Shishir, can you see the histogram? Is it possible?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes,
Now, when you see
Subash,
a
go ahead.
valley, when you see a valley, that means to say that this image is a very contrasty image. Okay. So very high contrasty image. So as a result, what you would want to do is bring down the contrast. When you see a peak, okay, can you see that this image has no contrast? So that is how you can tell from histogram which image has contrast or which image has no contrast. So based on finding out which image has contrast or no contrast, you will be able to judge and give the amount of contrast that is needed. So for example, because this image has a peak, so I know that this image needs contrast. Okay. So as a result, I'm going to start increasing contrast. Once you start increasing contrast, you will start seeing that the histogram is going to spread across the spectrum from the shadows to the highlights. Okay. So once I start seeing a valley, that means this image is very high contrast image. So I should pull back on how much of contrast. So in this case, I would want to give about plus 25. Now, I would also want to address some important aspects of the shadows. Now, when I increase the shadows, it is going to affect the image globally. So if you see, these are the areas that I also want to retain shadows because I want to make sure that there is good amount of contrast. If I start increasing shadows, this is going to go up globally. Now, this is something that I will address using a local adjustment, which we will talk about later. Okay. So increase a bit of shadows. And if you see, I would like to also make sure that an image has a healthy white point and a healthy black point. How do I give that? If I want to give a healthy white point, what I would do is hold down the Alt key and push the whites until I start seeing the, can you see that? Can you see that? That means this is too much of white. So I need to make sure I use the push the slider until I don't see anything and I come back. So that means I have blown out all the highlights. So white point is something that is very important. So I need to give a healthy white point and also make sure that it does not clip, and then the black point. So again, if I hold down the Alt key and move the slider to the left, I can start seeing that. Can you see it is start clipping? So that means this is too much of black. So I need to dial it down until I don't have any clipping warnings. So it is very important to spread your data across the spectrum. And once you spread the data across the spectrum from the left, what you see here from the left to the right, that means this is a healthy exposure. Okay, that is how you address the exposure, by making sure that you use all these slides, particularly the black point and the white point and the shadows and the highlights, to make sure that you spread the details or the data across the spectrum from left to right. Okay, I still feel that this is a little bit overexposed to my taste. So what I would like to do is bring it a touch, maybe to about, say about say about I can also click on this and start typing it. So about 10, you know, plus 0.10. Okay, so this is how you address the exposure. Now these sliders are to the taste actually, so it's more subjective. Okay, now texture is basically, it improves texture in your image. If you see, I like all these details in the texture. So what I could do is I could increase the texture. Can you see the details improving? Can you see? Is it visible, Shishir?
Yes, yes, Subhash. Subhash,
Once
on the
I
same
once I
note, I'm really sorry to interrupt. On the same note, just a quick time check. We have another 15 minutes, out of which we will give them
Okay,
another
okay,
5-10 minutes of question and answer, and then probably you can plan accordingly.
great, great.
Right?
Okay,
Thanks.
okay. So texture is basically when you want to make your image very crunchy. Now you wouldn't want to use texture everywhere. In this case, the rocks, or something that perhaps has some amount of texture, but I would not use it on the rocks. Maybe if I have a clothing, I would want to use textures. Okay, so texture is basically improves your details in the smaller pixels, basically. Okay, so if you want to increase details in small pixels, you would want to increase texture. Okay, clarity is to do with mid-tone contrast. I don't know if the students know what is a mid-tone contrast, uh, but if I go back to the image, let me go back to that gradient. That will give a better demonstration of what how the contrast works actually. Just a minute, Shishir.
Sure, sure.
Just give me a minute. Yeah. So if I want to demonstrate what the clarity does, it basically concentrates on the midtones. Can you see how the midtones are increasing or decreasing? So what happens is it will leave out the highlights and the shadows and work only in the mid-tone areas. Okay, so that is how the the clarity affects. It basically affects the middle tones in your image. It will leave out the brighter parts of the image and the darker parts of the image and increase contrast only from the middle tones, from say from here to about here also. Okay, that is how the clarity works. Okay, can you see that? Shishir, I hope you're able to see that variation.
Yeah, yeah, we can.
Okay, so that is something that perhaps is very important how the clarity slider works. So I can be a bit generous when using clarity compared to contrast. So as a result, I perhaps will be very careful using the contrast slider. But when I'm using clarity, I can be a bit generous because knowing that it will not affect the highlights and the shadows, but only the midtones. So as a result, I can be a little bit generous using this slider. Okay, that is how the contrast works. All right. Let's talk about, so far whatever I did was related to global adjustments. Okay. Now let us talk about, so far global adjustments. What is the meaning of global adjustments? It means that whenever I edit an image, it is going to be affected globally. Okay. Now the controls on the top, particularly the spot removal tool and the red eye reduction tool, graduated filter, radial filter, and the brush or the adjustment brush. These are the tools that are particularly used for what we call it as local adjustments. Okay, that means local adjustments means when I want to target a certain only a particular area in an image. Let's say I want to target only the sky. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a graduated filter across the sky to make sure that I darken the image. Okay, so I'm going to use the graduated filter and then drag it from top to till about here. Okay, so if you see that red part, that is what we call it as the overlay, mask overlay. So in order to enable that or disable that, you press O. So that means all that is red is what is going to be affected when I make some adjustments. So if you see, as soon as I brought the graduated ND filter, I get a set of controls here, for example. Okay, now I will disable that O or the overlay to show you what's going to happen. So I want to, as I said, my idea of using the graduated filter is to darken the sky only. I don't want the rest of the image to be affected. So which is what we call it as a local adjustment. Okay, or targeted selective adjustment. So I've enabled the graduated filter and I bring down the exposure. Now, can you see that the sky is darkening, but it is also darkening the structure, which I don't want. Okay, so I darkened the structure and I would want to increase the saturation in the blues, right? So I could increase the sky's saturation. Can you see? I've increased the sky. So I will do a bit of heavy adjustment for the visibility of the screen. Okay, generally I would like to go a little bit overboard when I'm projecting it on the screen because it will be visible for you much better. If I do subtle adjustments, you may not be able to see it on the screen. Okay, I will do a bit of heavy editing. Okay, I've decreased the exposure. I've also increased the saturation. Now the problem is what is happening? It is also affecting my structure, which I don't want to. That is where that is where I will bring the concept called localized adjustment. That means targeting a particular adjustment to affect only certain areas. Now, in this case, I want to affect only the sky. So what I will do is I will go to the brush tool and I will start. If I go to the overlay, I will start erasing where I don't want the adjustment. Okay. So I have pressed the brush and I will start. You see this? This is erase. You will see a minus. Okay. So I'll start erasing where I don't want the the exposure to be affected. Okay. Can you see? Okay. So now when it comes to the edges, there is something called as auto mask, which is very helpful to actually to manipulate the edges. So once I enable auto mask, it becomes easier for me to go and work on the edges. between the sky and the structure. Okay. So as a result, auto mask gives me the ability to go to the edges of the structure and still make sure that I do not touch the sky. Okay. And then I will start disabling auto mask and moving to the rest of the areas. So this is what we call it as localized adjustment. So that means I'm targeting a particular area. Unlike the global adjustment, I'm targeting a particular area. So now if you see before and after, this is before, this is after. Before, after, before, after. Got it? Of course, I could do a better job if I take more time, but I just, since we are running short of time, I just wanted to demonstrate how you do local adjustments or selective targeted selective adjustments. Okay. So once you finish with the graduated filter, you can press done. So this is, what we call it as localized adjustment using, so I just demonstrated using the graduated filter. You can also use the radial filter. For example, I can click on the radial filter and you will see that I will get same adjustments. Yeah, you will see that I'll get same adjustments what I got with the graduated ND filter. So I can use a radial filter to target particular areas. So in this case, I would want to say perhaps so let's say I want to affect only the person here, right? So I can put a radial filter there and I can increase the exposure or decrease the exposure. Okay, that means once I start increasing or decreasing the exposure, can you see whatever is within that radial circle is not affected. Whatever is outside is what is affected. Now, if you want to affect the inside, all you have to do is press this invert button. Can you see that invert? So you just check on that and it will start targeting whatever is inside. Okay. If I want to overexpose it or underexpose it. So radial and graduated filters are good for doing some amount of targeted selected adjustments. Okay. So if you simply don't like if you don't like this adjustment, you can select that pin, right? You can select that particular pin and then press the delete button. Okay. So I'll select that pin and press the delete button. Apart from the graduated and the radial filter, you also get a brush, adjustment brush. This is one of the very powerful tools in Lightroom uh, that perhaps is not available in Adobe Bridge, by the way. Of course, it is available in Adobe Camera Raw, but not in Bridge. Okay. Once I enable the brush, I will be able to start painting like the paint brush. Okay. So for example, let's say I want to increase some exposure in a particular area. So I can start painting. Okay. If you see, I'm able to paint the exposure in certain areas. So I can use all these filters, all these different criterias, right? So I can increase contrast. So at the same time, I can do, maybe I want to increase shadows. So once I start painting, can you see? This is what we call it as localized adjustment or targeted selective adjustment. Okay. So if you hover over the pin, you will know where and all that particular brush has been affected. Okay. So again, if you want to enable that overlay, press O. If you want to see where and all it has affected the brush, you can press the O and then you'll be able to see the targeted adjustment. Okay, so you have the ability to use brush to actually also, you know, make some selective adjustments. Okay, so once you see, generally the panels that you see is something that you generally move from top to the bottom. Okay, but over a period of time, once you start becoming more experienced in post processing, you will jump between one panel to the other panel. Okay, so you move from basic panel, say, to tone curves. Say, for example, I feel that this can, I can give more contrast by increasing the exposure, just giving a punch to the frame. Okay, so you can see the before and after. This is before, that is after. So you can use the turn curves to change your image. There is also the color panel or the HSL panel where you can improve colors. For example, I feel that this structure or this entire area is slightly yellowish in nature. So what I could do is go to the HSL slider, go to saturation. I can work on luminance or saturation. So I will click on saturation, and you can use this targeted adjustment. So you can click on this and then start bringing it down. So that means only in those areas you will start seeing that. So the oranges and yellows in that particular structure, the saturation is being reduced. Okay, so if you feel that the oranges and the yellow was too much, you can use the targeted adjustment tool, or you can manually bring down the sliders of oranges and yellow. I also feel that you can increase the blues. So saturation, you can increase the blues and also the aqua. How about some greens? You can also increase the saturation in the green areas. So once you do that, you'll start seeing more greens coming out. So you can start manipulating individual colors in an image. Of course, there is a limit to which how much you can manipulate. You can either use the saturation by targeting certain colors, or you can also target luminance. For example, if you see there is oranges and yellow in this particular structure, maybe you want to bring the exposure down perhaps. So you would use the sliders to bring down the exposure in those areas. Can you see? The exposure is now reduced. So the blues have been left out. The greens to some extent have been left out, and the oranges and yellows, I have reduced the exposure or the luminance values in those colors only. So that way you can use the color panel to target, improve color by using the saturation levels or the luminance levels of particular colors. Okay. You can also, as I told you, you can use selective adjustments in terms of healing also. Spot healing. So that means you can clone out or retouch a particular this. So this I feel is a distraction. So I can click on the spot removal, and either you can use two methods. You can clone or heal. Generally heal uh, is very good tool in Photoshop. So I can just write on it, and it will automatically remove or retouch. So you can, so it will tell you from which source it has taken to clone out or retouch a particular area. You can use, if you feel that that particular area is not suitable, drag the source area to perhaps better match it, right? Or there is another shortcut key like the forward slash. So if you use the forward slash, Lightroom will start searching for a better area. You can keep on moving until you find the right spot. Okay. So the Lightroom will look for the suitable spot from which it can clone that particular area. Okay. So these are, of course, not as powerful as the tools that you see in Adobe Photoshop, but you can do some decent job with the clone tool by removing some distractions. So I'll press done. So I have removed distractions by retouching an image. I have used global adjustments. I've showed you the global adjustments in basic panel. I have showed you a little bit about what the tone curve does. I have showed you the HSL panel where you can control exposure or saturation of certain colors in your image. You could use the tools, targeted adjustment tools like spot removal and graduated filter and the radial filter. You can also crop your images. So you press on this, you can crop your image. Okay. So if you want to tighten it, you can tighten it a bit, or you can select some presets from the crop and straighten area, like say 1:1 or 4:5, which is one of my favorite crop, uh, uh, you know, uh, aspect ratios. So I double click on it and it is cropped. Now, once I've finished the process, it is time for me to export. So I can, there are two ways to export a particular image. One is you come back to the library module and then you press the export button. Okay. You press the export button and then you will be given a dialog box in which you can say which folder do you want to choose to export your images to. Okay. Let's say I will put it in the, say, pictures folder. Okay, I've selected the pictures folder. That is where it is going to go. Then I can give a file name or a custom name, say Humpy Tower. Then I can specify if I'm taking it to social media, I will keep it as JPEG. And of course, if you know the color space for the web space is sRGB. If you want to send it to a printer or photo lab, you will choose Adobe RGB 1998. Okay. You can specify the quality. You want the quality to be 50% or 100%. You can, this is something that is really unique in Lightroom. You can limit, let's say if a client asks, I want all my images to be less than 4 MB. So you can specify saying that before you export, I want my images to be less than 4 MB. So that is 3900 KB. And then you can decide to provide the parameters for image resizing. So let's say long edge or the short edge. So in this case, the long edge, I want it to be 1080 pixels at so and so resolution. Okay. And then what about sharpening? You can provide sharpening, high, standard, low. Okay. And then you can also provide, have copyright options, right? You can include metadata in your images. Okay. And then you can also, if you want to watermark your image, you could do that also. Okay. You can have a custom watermark if you want, right? So at Subash Rao, so it can be on the left side or the right side. You can specify where you want it to be. Okay. So if you want to send it to the lab, obviously the image format changes from JPEG to TIFF. Okay. Or whatever the client asks for you. So you will decide on that. Now, this is something that has the user presets is something that is really new in Photoshop Lightroom, the latest version, where you can select a particular image and simultaneously, you know, uh, uh, check user presets for various formats. So a same image at the same time can be exported, one for web, one for the client, one for the printer at the same time. Okay, that is something that is really unique and it has been added very recently. You could also create your own presets. So once you specify all the parameters, if you think that you will keep on using this, you can create this as a preset by adding, say, 1080 JPEG for web. And then, so that means every time You don't have to specify parameters that you use this. If you want to use it regularly, you can keep it as a preset, and then all you have to do is just click on this, check this, right? And then export it. Check this. Sorry, the system is a bit slow. Right? What's this? Okay, so you can select different user presets at the same time, and then once you start exporting, it is simultaneously start exporting in different formats that you require. So right now you see I have selected, I have chosen all the three presets, and once I press the export button, all the three presets, so the image will be exported with all the three presets. Okay, so I think we will stop it here, Shishir.
Yeah, Subash.
There
I
is so
think
many more things that I would like to show, but
I was I was about to come to that point, Subash. I think you have pretty much covered only percent, very less percent
I
of what
probably would have just would have whatever I've shared now is only just probably 2% of it actually.
exactly. So what
I
I
have
was
left out batch processing. I have left out many other
correct.
aspects of processing actually.
So
So
that was one of the questions out from our viewer, right? So if you could show the batch processing. But
okay,
what I was thinking for the benefit of time, just
I
that we
could
are
I in a minute I could actually show if somebody is
sure,
interested.
sure,
Batch
sure. Please go
processing.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so is my screen still visible?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, so batch processing works. For example, you see these images. Now, I would want to process only if see from so there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images, right? So let's take 5 images. So I want to process all the 5 images together. So what I do is I select all five. Okay, I come back to the develop module. Okay, now so remember, if you see the strip, the film strip, all the 5 images are selected. See, all the 5 images have been selected. Now there is something called as sync. Can you see the small notch here next to the sync button? So this says enable auto sync changes to all selected images. So once I enable that, auto sync is on. So that means whatever I do, increase exposure, it will increase exposure to all 5 images. Can you see the difference in the film strip? Are you, is it visible? So all 5 images have been processed together. See, it also highlights using text. So enable shadows. Now, if I come back to the library module, you will see the difference. Can you see all 5 images have been affected? I just processed using the auto sync button. Okay. So that is how you batch process an image. Does that address my question? I hope.
Yeah, I think it was
And once
pretty.
you finish,
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
and once you finish, you have to make sure to disable the auto sync. That is very important. If you forget, then it probably will be a little bit of a mess. So you have to remember to disable the auto sync once you finish the batch processing. I hope that addresses the question, Shishir.
Yes, yes, very much, Subash. Thanks for that. Thanks for extending the time, definitely. And like I was saying, we can definitely have more sessions on Lightroom where you can, you now that you know what you have covered, you can definitely we will find some time out and schedule some other sessions in relation to Lightroom, so you can probably take that up,
Sure,
right?
sure,
Definitely, that
sure.
would be a pleasure. I think it's time now. So I definitely would take a minute and thank all the audience or the viewers out there for being patient and asking the relevant questions. And we have definitely tried
Thank you.
addressing all questions that are possible. Thanks to the audience, and definitely a big thanks to you as well, Subhash. It
Thank
was
you.
it was fantastically driven, and it was very easy to understand.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
we definitely look forward for more
Thank you.
sessions from you.
I think I hurried it a bit because of the 1 hour
No,
time frame.
no, no
Uh,
worries at all. So what we can
so
do is we can probably for the next sessions we can work backwards and probably
sure,
schedule a revision if need be, if you feel so, right?
definitely,
Cool.
definitely.
Thanks, Subhash. You want to close the session by addressing something? You can
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much for whoever was part of the session. I hope this has been helpful. I don't know if you already knew this, or perhaps these are the things that I would like to generally share because I've been using Lightroom for almost a decade. So there is a bit of thought process that goes into the photo management, particularly managing your assets in the Lightroom. That is something that perhaps I've seen a lot of photographers neglect because they concentrate on image editing and delivering because of the deadlines to the clients. But this is something that is very important whenever you're free to housekeep, you know, uh, deleting all those images that are perhaps not necessary, providing keywords or giving keywords to your images so that you can find it at a later date. You can star rate your images. You can create collections. I showed you a glimpse of what the collections can do. There is so much that the collection can do. In fact, once I import my images in the folders, I create collections and never touch folders. I always go to collections. I never touch the folders. So I spend 90% of my browsing and reviewing images using collections. You can also create smart collections, which I have not showed because of the lack of time, but smart collections is also a great way to automate your organizing. So once you create smart collections, it becomes really easy. So if you set up a criteria saying that automatically collate or collect images as with the given keyword as red. So the moment I give any image that I've newly imported as red, one image automatically goes into that collection. So that way, smart collections are a great way to actually manage your assets, particularly your photographs. You spend a lot of time. And lastly, I would also like to say this: Photoshop Lightroom should never be used as a standalone application. It is something that needs to be, you know, made as a part of both Lightroom and Photoshop. Once you start your process in Lightroom, for advanced work, you take it to Photoshop, you finish your image in Photoshop, and then come back to Lightroom. This is something that I have also inculcated as part of my process. Lightroom per se cannot be used as a standalone application. It has to be used in conjunction with Adobe Photoshop.
I second that, Subhash. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Shashi.
the wonderful session. Thanks for the audience.
Thank
We will
you.
meet you guys soon. Stay safe, stay indoors. Thank you, Subhash.
Thank you. Thank you, Shishir. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.